Hi guys, today I am working on a unicorn painting, so let's talk about the things that I did to plan this piece, to sketch it out, to make it happen. It's gonna be a pretty low-key video today. Let's just hang out and make art together. But yes, as you can tell, this panel is specifically shaped like a unicorn, so it made it pretty easy to know what the subject matter was going to be. And this was a panel that was available through Pocatello, but it is no longer available because it's a special edition. But if you like the idea of creating pieces with a specific shaped panel, then Pocatello is a great place to go check that out. They have monthly special edition panels as well as some pretty interesting ones that are always there. But so I got this unicorn to paint on, and I played around with several different color palettes specifically. I ended up going with more of this, or what ends up being this dark color palette for the unicorn, where she has this gray fur, I guess. Dark gray with like this magenta gradiating into a little bit more of a true purple mane. And that was fun. Normally when I am drawing my own unicorns, which doesn't really happen that often, but when I do, I usually like to base them more off of little deers. And I like to go more of like a really white, clean, opalescent kind of a deer. I just really like that kind of aesthetic for a unicorn. So it was fun to have to work a little bit differently with this one, since it was already shaped like a unicorn. It was more of a horse silhouette than what I would normally pick. So it helped me to break out of that repetitious box that I think a lot of us end up getting stuck in sometimes. So it was fun to look at it and take it in a new direction, and also to take the colors in a new direction. To sketch it out originally, I just took a top-down photo of the panel before I did anything to it, and I took that into Photoshop. That way I could actually just sketch right on top of it, and I was fitting the silhouette of the unicorn panel that I had, rather than trying to jerry-rig a unicorn to fit into it after the fact. So that helped me to just make sure that the ratio was correct and everything, and that was really helpful. It's something that I'll do in the future because I have a moon-shaped panel that I'm really excited to use, and I'll use that same kind of process where I'll just take a shot of the panel and then I can sketch right on top of it in Photoshop. But another really simple solution too, if you're going to do this type of shaped panel and you don't use Photoshop or anything digital like that, you could always just trace the panel right onto some paper and sketch right on top of that. That would have worked really well. In fact, I probably would have enjoyed that process a little bit more. I really like sketching traditionally. Digitally is just really fast and easy to be able to manipulate the dimensions and the proportions, so it comes together quickly. But there's just a certain joy that comes from sketching traditionally that I really like. I really actually enjoy going in with one of the darkest colors in a piece. I find that I gravitate towards that really frequently, which doesn't work very well for sticking to like strictly correct watercolor techniques, but I do it anyways because I like getting that really dark color in there so that I can compare all of the other values in the rest of the piece to that. That's like the cornerstone of the piece, so everything else is structured around it. I find that that helps my brain work through it a little bit better, and it helps the contrast better, at least for me. But yeah, with watercolors, that can be a struggle sometimes when you're painting something that's really light next to a dark thing that you've already painted. So it's not ideal, but for some reason it's just, I like it, and I tend to muscle memory go right into the dark colors. And for oil painting, it works out really well. Working on the mane was actually a really helpful scenario for mixing colors. I have a hard time sometimes mixing the shadows for the base color. I tend to go really, really saturated, or I naturally want to use a very different color. I think that comes from watercolors, where I can pick like a really blue for a shadow on skin, but because it's so diluted, it ends up being very softened and desaturated because it's layered. But with oils, it's less of that. It becomes a lot more of a struggle making them blend well together, and I am slowly learning, but specifically working on the mane here, I really enjoyed that effect. I actually went more saturated, but blending it from this really kind of poppy bright magenta into more of the purple shadow, purple blue shadow. It helped me to see where that specific way of mixing the colors works well and how I like that, and where it was in the hair and I wanted it to be very saturated. That helps me to categorize, okay, this is when I can use it, this is how it works well, and it helps me to remember that, for example, skin, it doesn't work as well, which is a lesson that I have learned in the past, but this is a lesson that I'm learning now, is that it does help things feel very bright and sharp and saturated. And the color that I'm using to get this really saturated, bright magenta color is actually mostly quinacridone red, which I think is so interesting because that's one of my absolute favorite watercolor colors. So it's fun to see that that same pigment, I actually don't know if it's created using the same like mineral pigment. It probably is, though. I'm assuming it is, since that tends to be the convention with how paints are named. But yes, it's mostly with quinacridone red, and I love that color. I love that color in oil paints. It's super saturated, really bright. It adds so much life and energy to any of the mixtures that I use it in. I made sure to get a spare of that one. It's sitting up in my closet ready to go as soon as this tube runs out, which I don't think will be very long. It's the red that I almost always pick from. It's the one that ends up the brightest, and I love it. It's also a really cool red, which fits a lot better with a lot of the palettes that I tend to mix. I really love cool colors, so it just blends better and meshes well with that. The line art for the mane was actually an interesting compromise, since the outer lines of the mane were lined up against such a dark color, that really dark gray. So it needed to be really dark to help seal off the mane, either really dark or really light. And those are my two options that I was thinking about. And I ended up going with the really dark one. I think maybe it would have been a really cool effect had I gone in with really white, light line work. I think that would have been really cool. So maybe in retrospect, that might have been a more unique way of approaching it. And I might consider that more in the future. That's one of the really fun things about doing opaque line work, like when I'm using my oil paints or when I'm doing gouache on top of my watercolors, is that I can go really light, especially over darker areas like this. And that's something that I'm excited to explore, to see how I can really play with the different colors that the lines are, rather than just gravitating to simply a darker shade of whatever thing I'm lining. But working on the darker line work, I knew that to counterbalance that, after that was dry, I would want to go in and add a lot of really sharp pops of highlight to the manes. That way it could have just really clean, sharp highlights that would go right next to the line and then more towards the center of the hair as well. That would just give it more dimension to it, since I did feel like I went too dark with the base color of the mane. I wish that I had lightened it up a little bit more, so there was more contrast between that and the gray color of the unicorn. They could have played better together. I think that probably what I would have done specifically is I would have had it lighter towards the top of the unicorn and then got to basically the same value that it was now at the bottom of the unicorn. That way there could be a bit of a gradient, and there would be a direction to the way that the eye would want to travel over it, and it would draw it closer to the eye of the unicorn. And yeah, I think that that would have been ideal. I would have been really happy with that. I tried to shift it more that way when I ended up doing the line or the highlights, but it could have been better had I started off that way, and that's okay. It's important to take stock of things that I know I could have tweaked a little bit better earlier on, and that allows me to remember that next time I'm working on a piece that has a similar issue or a similar thing that I could fix. And this unicorn is available as a print at my shop, which I'm really excited about because it's been a really long time since I've had a print added. I want to do that more. I really love doing more print artwork. Anyways, she's available there. The original painting is also available, and this is just ready to hang right up on your wall, which is really fun. You don't have to frame it or anything. And yeah, both of those are at my shop. There's a link in the description that'll take you over there. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.